So we're moving now into boundary resolution and plat preparation, actually doing the work. So the last lecture was case studies. We looked at a dozen surveys from around the state of Georgia that had various elements that come up. Now I chose those so that they're not just the typical survey that everything just falls in a line and is basically not very noteworthy because we're trying to learn here about how we address things that come up. But we have to ease into this a little bit easier. So this lecture is going to be on basically how I do boundary resolution as a professional land surveyor. In other words, you've up to this point, you've gotten a lot of theory, a lot of academia on boundary doctrine. We've gotten instructions on how to perform research, how to evaluate research, how to analyze research, controlling elements, how things need to be done. Uh, but now it's time to actually bring all that together and apply it. So I've chose from our files here a survey that we prepared just in the last few months. That is a retracement of a for rural area, it's kind of a small lot. It's about an acre and a half. For the metropolitan area, it's a large estate lot. But we're retracing about a 30-year-old subdivision plat where the computations were no doubt done with a surveyor or with a computer. No doubt the survey field work was done with a total station, uh, almost positively not robotic. Uh, Possibly single turn angles, possibly doubled angles, with whatever type of error a person would generally encounter or produce when doing a survey with a manual total station 30 years ago. The data may have even been collected by hand in a field book. I'm familiar with the surveyor that did the subdivision, and this is about the time that some of his crews used data collectors. Many did not. Some did field computations with a HP 41 calculator. Some did no field computations at all. So this is a very, I think, common scenario that you'll encounter. Obviously, in my opinion, if you're doing a interior subdivision lot in the metro area where it's plate graded and flat, and all the pins were set within a half a tenth a year ago, 10 years ago, and you go retrace it, that's basically measurement and location. There's not really a lot of boundary resolution. So uh, this lot 14, Mountain Creek Hollow, is going to be our example and of a fairly simple survey. And then uh, you'll take this, hopefully learn from it, contact me if you have any questions, and then this kicks off module 7. And this week, you will be applying everything that you've learned so far in legal aspects and in professional practice. I will give you a similar set of data as to what we are beginning with. And you will make some decisions, do some computations, produce a survey that meets Georgia technical standards, and submit it. And we'll see how you go from there. I hope everybody does very well. So I'm going to start off um, sharing my screen instead of my face, and I've also made some steps to make my cursor larger and easier to track. Uh, Even though if you're viewing it on a full size screen, the the cursor or mouse from module 6 lecture was not too bad, but I'll try to make it a little bit easier. So what we're surveying is lot 14. And this is what it looks like. This plat never got scanned and made it onto GSCCA, so we had to go to the clerk's office and get a copy, which, as you can probably tell, this is actually a photograph. That's what we do in records rooms a lot in the current era is we'll photograph a plat or a deed, and you get usually better resolution. It's more efficient for me. It's not about saving 50 cents per copy. It's saving the time to take the book apart, carry it to the copier, make the copy, look at it, write on it, and go with it. It's a lot easier for me to take a photograph of a deed or a plat, email it to myself. The subject line is the book and page, and then it's easy to manage. But there are lots of different ways you can definitely make that process more efficient by scanning or photographing, putting it right into the cloud. If you're able to put it right into the same cloud storage that your uh, files run on, then that's even more efficient. But this is our vesting description says Lot 14, Mountain Creek Hollow, Phase 1, as recorded in Plat Book 32, page 59. So here, Darrell has written where he's printed this off, Plat Book 32, page 59. Here's Lot 14. We normally highlight our subject property so that we know what we're getting into. And you'll notice here that this was hand drawn on Mylar. They shaded out a floodplain, and that made some of the information here along the property very difficult to read. And so he made notes in the record room as to the bearings and distances that were obscured. One thing that I learned in reanalyzing this is this distance on the plat that's obscured is 296.11, but it extends 16, that distance extends 16.07 feet east beyond our property line. Our property line is shown on here somewhere. We'll come back to that, but as the center line of Fawcett Creek. And at this time, there was another property owner on the other side of the creek. Um, or possibly on the other side of the landlot line, because he's trying to indicate here that we're following the landlot line to this 16.07 foot call. So that's why we didn't worry about trying to come up here and tie into this landlocked corner and come down the 1145. We felt like there was enough evidence to uh, confirm our location as lot 14. A lot corner in a platted subdivision meets the requirements of a point of reference. If you want to look back at the technical standards for maps and plats, so sometimes running off 1145 feet behind an old toll station survey may just create more problems than it solves. But uh, here is again our lot, and so we also need. Let's see what else we've got right here. Here are the calls. Then here are the lots above us. You can see this a little bit better. Here's where the 16.07 runs out. So that 296.11 winds up being 280.03, and that's 100th of a foot off. I'm going to chalk that up to rounding. Notice there's an open circle indicated 30 feet back from the creek. That's kind of hard to read, and 30 feet back from the road, which is kind of hard to read. Going up the road, looks like they've set not the corners, but reference monuments 15 feet back and 23 feet back. So what I've done, this is AutoCAD based Carlson survey. This is the software that we use here at my firm. I'm not trying to promote or disparage any particular manufacturer or software producer, but this is what I came up under C&G software probably, I don't know, 25 years or so ago. They sold out to Carlson. Maybe it's less than that. And Carlson has been what we've been used to. My experience in limited, very limited. Earlier in my career, there was not a lot of selections in software, and it was obviously not very advanced. And being that I've been in business for 30 years now, I've not experimented with any other software. So I can't tell you firsthand experience, but I can say that in my earlier experiences, I found that different softwares did the same thing. They just used different approaches, different buttons, different commands. So this is what works for me. I encourage everyone to use what works for you. It'll be okay. So what we did here was, and instead of going through every step and making this terribly long, uh, we've got a function here in the survey menu for enter deed description. And I use this a lot. So I'm going to start a new one. All those parameters remain the same. And what I'm going to do is come back up here to the picture of our lot, and we'll pull this over so you can see it. From our lot, from this bend point, we have a connecting call across the road, and then we have a called for pin 15 feet out the road. We could come on down, and there's another one 17 feet out the road. Now, if you think about what I've told you about the laws of significant digits, the fact that we're seeing distances to the nearest foot on just a 30-year-old survey that otherwise has distances to the hundredth, that yes, that is a red flag. So we're going to come down to here to this bend point and go the reverse of the connecting call, which is shown as northeast. So we're going to go southwest, which is quadrant 3, 80, my bad, 76 degrees, 4 minutes, 24 seconds, 50.11 feet. So see what the program does now, it throws a polyline at the exact bearing and distance. So it's a lot easier to do positional relationships with polylines that you can just spin, move, rotate, as opposed to calculating hard points, in my opinion, everywhere you go. So then after that, pin across the road, 388, 5141, 429, 28. Well, but I don't want to go the whole lot distance. I just want to go 15 feet. So that would be 388, quadrant 3 for southwest, 88. I said that 5141, 15 feet. So what I've also done is looking up the road, spare you all of the sausage making. Here is the plat for the adjacent lots to our north. It's lot 13 and lot 12. I have come up and similar exercise built in where we may find pins going north of us. So that's what we're doing at the moment. So this would be something that I would probably do in okay, so this is something I would do in our predetermined analysis where we're getting ready for the crew to go survey. So looking back over here, um, this is a PDF of a staking sheet that was sent out with the crew where all these pins for lot 14, 13, and 12. We typically go up at least one lot in each direction. I suggest that you also do the same depending on what you find to verify some monuments that will confirm that you're in the right place. And this will be on an exam later, so I'm going to be really direct with this. Sometimes surveyors, people who are not surveyors, especially construction stakers, engineers, contractors who have access to high precision equipment, whether if it's total stations, robots, the autolites, GPS, it's not uncommon. Thankfully, it's fairly rare, but you will encounter at some point where someone has gone out and put a set of pins in the ground that matches the record geometry beautifully. Uh, I've seen this my entire career, especially when people do not have or use metal detectors and they say, well, I can't find the pins. I'm going to set up this instrument or they find one pin, whether if it's an actual corner or not. Sometimes you just don't know. And they just go about turning angles, assuming north meridians, and putting pins in the ground. A lot of times people see those. They build fences to them. They drive posts or stakes by them. And when you arrive on the property, your natural assumption is these are the corners. So if you stop right there and you say, oh, wow, everything checked beautifully, everything was within a tenth. Let's go back to the office, boss. You may have very well just made a big mess because you may have just taken a bunch of erroneous pins thrown in the ground that fit with each other but are not the correct corners. The only way to avoid this and to know that you're not making a big mess like that is to go out at least one lot in each direction to confirm with some other original monuments from the subdivision or accepted monuments, maybe older subdivisions, and know that you are where you're supposed to be. So here is our field prep sheet where we've computed using that old plat, our subject lot 14 and two lots in both directions. So this is loaded into an ASCII file. The crew goes out. They start using this to find corners and get oriented. They use an address, the house that's on the lot or the lot next door. Again, here's our lot. These are the lots to our north. This is a retracement of the lot to the south. Now this is the same surveyor, but 20 something years later. And this is just where lots have been combined. Uh, you might notice that this distance, these distances back match up with what was on the other plat. And then this is just a plat that we found across the creek. It doesn't really matter that much because the creek is the line. Notice here, center line of Fawcett Creek is property line. So we've, and then on our retracement, saying, the surveyor of record, which is what you call the surveyor that did the original, he's saying center line of creek is property line. We know that it was the property line at the time the subdivision was done. He did not say it on the plat. Might have been on this sheet further down, but nevertheless, that becomes important. So the crew took all this, they went out, they did a great job of locating everything along the property lines. They located a pin up here, and this is taken from the final work product. So there are things on here that kind of give it away, but like this 127 calc point. We'll come back to that. So here's what we found. You got, the record plat here shows this driveway along the property line. The future retracement or combination shows this center line of gravel drive subject to any easement. Obviously, the intention was to make it a joint driveway. I believe they incorporated that into the deed language, but it never made it to the plat. So, wow, yippee, here we are. He found pins up both lots up the road, found one pin down the road, found a pin on the back here, and saw a pin across the road. Thought he'd go ahead and locate that. So we're going to go on over here, and here's where all this was done. I went ahead and built in from the subdivision plat where that pin across the road is supposed to be. My technique is to take all these polylines that fit perfectly with the record plat subdivision. I build them in somewhere else. Right click, clipboard, copy. Now they're on my clipboard just like any other copy paste. What's nice about an AutoCAD program is now I go back to my clipboard with the right paste and I'm going to paste this as a block. Why am I doing that? Because I've got a half a dozen polylines merged together over there where I built them in at different times. So I don't want to just copy them over as 6 different polylines and twist them and move them around. Now let's work on the presumption that pin number 60 is in fact this pin that is, what's that supposed to be? 30 feet back. So this node is the midpoint of this line. That's the way it comes in when you do a block. But we're going to come up here and just select the move command. My O snap is on, so it grabs that node, and I pull it up here to number 60. I'm going to drop it right on that node. So what that means is now the polyline, the node that I went back and created 30 feet back from the end of the lot line, I'll pull the plat over. If this is the corner up here on the right of way, they're showing 30 feet back to a reference pin. So I went and made nodes in my polyline just by add nodes. I would select a circle. Let's go back and I'll show you how I did it. This is supposed to be instructional. I hope I'm not going too fast. So I start drawing a circle, 30 feet back. This is what I would have done is highlighted that, add a vertex, come over, drop it in on that intersection. That's how this node right here got to be. So that's where we are. You have to start a trial and error process somewhere on each piece of property that you survey. You just have to assume, usually use your gut. I feel good about this pen. It looked like nobody had ever messed with it. Maybe nobody had ever found it. It was very, well guarded. It looked to be in pristine condition, blah, blah, blah. So you start trying to fit everything around trial and error to support that, to defend that, and then establish the rest of your boundary as you go. So we do that. We've started with 60. We're assuming that it's right. Now, wow, look, we're missing this pin in the back. It is a cool, looks to be about 6.5 feet offline. Oh my goodness. Now see how we're doing up here. We're missing this pin. We're missing this pin. At this point, you should have a clue that all of our endpoints and where we're looking for them are to the right of the monuments that we found as being oriented from number 60. This is because our record plat was on a magnetic north, which means it could be within 5 or 10 degrees of north. Might even be more in rare occasions. All of our data here was rotated to grid north. Now, it's often a good idea to put out your work and to rotate in the same meridian that you're retracing. But what we find more and more is the benefits of using grid north means that future work snap in place a whole lot better. It also allows for using and importing georeferenced outsourced data, such as publicly sourced LiDAR data, georeferenced aerial imagery. If you have that available in the county that you're working from the GIS department, we get that from a couple of different sources where we pay for it. If you're on grid, especially if you'll just do the slight tinkering to scale it, then you're good. And it'll drop right in. You can just turn all that on and everything fits, which can be important, especially if you're trying to figure out when a road or some sort of encroachment or improvement on the property came to be. So anyway, our magenta line is record deed work, and it's on reference magnetic north. All of our shots here that were plotted from our field data that was reduced, all of that is on grid. So we're going to just take this record geometry and we're going to rotate it. And we're going to rotate it around our number 60. I'm going to use a reference bearing rather than trying to compute it or anything funny. And I know I've got a node in here where this pin is supposed to be. So I'm going to just grab it and then snap over to our pin that we found. So, that node is right there. That node to the pin found is 64 hundredths of a foot. Now, I can tell you that 30 years ago, that's probably not too bad. Notice we got some error. So maybe, let's see, from that node to that pin, it's 38 hundredths. So at this point, I'm going to say, I don't like number 60 as much as I thought. Let's try dragging it down and sitting on this rebar. Test our rotation. We're not off too bad, but let's just go ahead and rotate our record geometry to hold 95 and then rotate that around to where it's sitting right on 97. So now our record geometry is holding 95 and it's rotated to 97. So now we can do some more testing and see how that works out. Now what's interesting here is the pin down the road, we're missing it by 33 hundredths. Our record geometry is 33 hundredths to the south of it. Let's go back up and see how we're doing on number 60. Well, now our record geometry is about 21 hundredths south of that. So I'm finding some consistency in the slop. Slop is not a technical word, it's just my word for uh, what we've got out there, the error that we have encountered. But it's important to note that, it's fairly consistent for a 30-year-old total station survey done with semi-sloppy quality control. That's 32 hundredths over there, which means, basically on my current rotation, if I take our record geometry and pop it up to 51, I am really close all over here with, I'm 11 hundredths just out of position from 51 to 83. Now I'm even better with my original number 60. It's only 13 hundredths offline now. We found a marked punch hole in a rock outcropping on the bluff going down to this creek. So, I'm liking this pretty good. Now I've moved off, so I'm not on 97. But here's how we're going to go about computing the boundary, because now I feel like I'm not using this polyline for anything more than some calculated positions, but not anything that's going to be, hard boundary point, a monumented point. So what we've done here, and I'll just kind of go through and explain it, is if you look back at our record plat here, notice 20 feet and 129.42. 20 and 129.42. Remember that. So now I'm going to do an inverse 95 to 97, 129.69. That's versus 129.42. So that's 27 hundredths long. Again, we're within what I would expect for tolerances. So we're not going to do something moronic and pin farm or say IPS 27 hundredths offline. These are the corners. These are the pins. We're just going to go with it. Now, another thing that's worth pointing out is that the subdivision plat says half-inch rebars set at all corners. We found a 5/8. So that, yes, is a little bit of a red flag. Where did it come from? Because everything else that we found except for the punch hole was a 1/2 inch. Now, a situation like this, you go back and ask the crew chief, are you sure it was a 5/8? Yes. So this is either a pin that has been replaced by someone else, like myself. Our firm, we set 5/8 rebars. Most likely what happened is this is a 1/2 inch that was just caught in the middle of a rib to where the diameter at the top looks bigger, and the crew chief misidentified it as a 5/8 rebar. I'm pretty sure that's what happened here. This is just an example of how you need to go about evaluating things. So we located the creek. The creek is a riparian boundary. It's about a 20-foot wide trout stream. So where we locate the stream today is where the boundary is. That's not where these calc points or this record geometry was back in the day. So this punch hole is most likely the litmus point put in right here, indicated on the record subdivision plat. So we're going to hold 60 and 104 as original monumentation. 60 is going to come out to the road right away, 30 feet, which is right there what the subdivision plat called for. So we would use the traverse routine and traverse from point 60, bearing 104 through 60, a distance of 30 feet, and create number 107. Now you can also do some, you can build some of the original subdivision plot points in and translate and rotate by block and do some fancy stuff there. Uh, while I realize I'm just overlooking the fact that we're within about that same tolerance of slop on the two pins we found. Main thing is we're not on some duplicate set of pins that's off bad. Now our very worst is up here where this point is 28 hundredths off of that property line, and based on our current rotation we're 72 hundredths out of position. Again, that's not enough for me to think that we want to change anything down here, because all we're really doing is we're sitting on, we're going to set our record geometry back on 95, and that's going to be used. Actually, let me see what he did. We're going to set it back on number 60, it looks like, for purpose of computing. Now, again, what I was going to say, or what I was in the process of saying is, you can do point blocks, translate and rotate them. I find it easier to take this polyline, or this polyline scheme, in this case a block reference, is what that actually shows up as. When you click it, it's not a polyline, it's a block reference over here. And I like to get it where I want it, and then I just go in and manually store, do coordinate management, manual storage, pick out a point number, pick coordinates on screen. I got my O snap on, so it snaps right to my snaps. And so I'm very efficiently translating all this record geometry, the positional relationships, from a polyline to coordinates, because we'll draw the plat from coordinates. So we've set on 60, we've got it rotated as best as we think we like it, and we would manually traverse from a bearing of 60, or from point 60 bearing 104 to 60, that 30 foot, that's 127, or we could have just picked that node off of it. That's how number 121 came to be down here, which is, it's this point right here. And then 122 is this point, which is right over here. 123 is the next one down the line, which is this one right here. Next one down after that is 124, 125, and then 126. Except 126 is going to be coming back to our record plat again. Let me scoot this over so we can see them both at the same time. So we know how 126 came to be, or 125, but now to set 126 to establish coordinates on this corner, we'll hold 95, we'll go bearing 97 to 95, we'll go this 20 feet, which is the record, pop number 126 in. Normally we'll come back in and check versus 125, which was spun up the road a little bit. But make sure we'll inverse 125 to 126 and make sure that it's within some reasonable semblance of this bearing right here, this north 54, 41, 33, 17.22. Now, in some cases, you may want to record or note in your file what your rotation bearing is. In other words, the difference between the meridian that you're putting your plat out on and the record. That might help you in evaluating. I kind of do that in my head now, but that's a good idea. Now, so we've identified each sideline. We've identified how we build in the right of way along the road. Now, something to point out is this driveway right here, it's not on the property line all the way down, but it's not called for. And even if it did, the plat called for, if it says center line of driveway is property line. In other words, this is a simultaneous conveyance scheme of property division Here is the simultaneous conveyance that happened. This is the subdivision plat. Yes, it indicates a gravel drive. The property line is not riparian. It does not move with the driveway. Or if the surveyor incorrectly or in error located a driveway in the wrong place, maybe a bad backside, who knows, then that would not control. But we have monumentation. We have 95 and 97, which nail us down nice. I mean, we know that this is 95 and 97 fit everything in. And instead of, notice we start out in the center of the driveway. Then the property line eases up to the north. Maybe these folks wanted to pull the driveway, excuse me, down on their property. Maybe on the original subdivision plat, it was just a logging road or some sort of bulldozer trail. And then the people to the south developed that, smoothed it, shaped it, got a better grade, got it to where they liked it, and that horizontally moved where it falls on the ground. That is not uncommon. Again, the rear property line, the east boundary, is the center line of Fawcett Creek. It is a riparian boundary. So where our predecessor located it is nice to know, but we are not going with that. We're going with the creek as we've located it. Now, I'm going to turn on our boundary layer. The red polyline is the line that we actually held. We held our shots along the creek. We extended on the north, we extended 60 through 104, intersected it with 105 and 106, a simple bearing intersect, computed point number 129. Same thing down here, we held 95 and 97, extended it to the creek, created point number 128. Boundary resolved. I'll even freeze the point layer. This is what the plat winds up looking like. Crew did a great job in identifying all manner of evidence or possession along the property lines, which you will remember is a requirement in the state board rule. And even if it was not codified, if you go to a state that's not that specific, if you don't, you are making a mistake. So we found the base of a slope. The neighboring lot built, again, this is mountainous property. So when they built their house, their fill slope extended down into our property. So that's some possession, some adverse possession, occupation at one time. Is it an encroachment? We don't really know. That's really not our job as surveyors to classify it, just to let people know what's out there. Being that there was some question about the driveway and what's going on, there's this culvert where they piped some storm water. It's not very far from the property line, like 10 feet. So crew went ahead and located that just to keep everybody in proximity. That there is no actual requirement to show power boxes, telephone pedestals, and water valves, which we have located up here. But it's a good idea to. Why? For one, from a title aspect, that puts the user of our plat on notice that there's telephone, power, and water out there, and here's where they're located. They're not inside the road right of way. We may have utilities that cross our property. Notice that there's a well right up the road. So why do we have a well and a water valve? Do we have county water or a private water system? There is a private water system. Maybe the well's part of it. Notice that the well is not shown on the subdivision plat. Wow, got a few things going on. So I'm going to pull over and show you the end product. This is the plat that was produced by our firm. It's been recorded in the clerk's office. We're showing, I'm going to zoom in. Again, this is Daryl Whitworth, a very competent surveyor in our firm. He's been with the company since the 1990s. I guess he's 27, 28 years now. Notice here's lot 13, deed book, plat book reference. South adjoiner 16R, that was the combination plat. There's the deed reference, plat reference, showing Quail Run Drive. Notice the road is not centered in the right of way. It doesn't concern us. We don't necessarily have to say that. If you're a rural road and you've got a right-of-way deed that says 30 feet from center, that has a totally different set of implications and requires further evaluation. But if you think back to our subject plat, it's a simultaneous conveyance. The bearings and distances on the plat constitute how the developer wanted to sell it off. So glad the road is in the right of way. Sometimes it's not. And here we've labeled this 24-inch corrugated metal pipe that comes under the road. Another one here, we're showing this 36-inch. And I see what he did was he held the record geometry all the way down and then intersected these two pins, held them on line, and said that, this one's 19.7 feet back, this one's 27.9 feet back. Sometimes we'll put that distance to the hundredth, sometimes we'll put it to the tenth. It just kind of depends on the type of property. We show this 8-foot road bed, but what I was pointing out is the way he's computed that, building in the record geometry down the road, the error or the obvious difference is going to be in call 8. It's going to differ a little bit. And then the lines intersecting the pins made this 19.7 feet back instead of 20 feet even. That doesn't bother me a bit because if you go back and look, remember, they say 20, it says 20.00. Most of these are to the nearest foot. So if we're within 3/10 on something that's calling for the nearest foot, we're certainly within some tolerance there. Would have been just as and possibly more defensible to have created this calc point 20.00 out towards this driveway because 20.00 was the distance on the plat. But you also have a very defensible set of geometry all down the right of way and along this property line. Now, these corners falling along a driveway, we didn't see the need in setting those corners. Nobody would see them. Monuments out there are sufficient to perpetuate the property line. Again, here's this pin that's 27.9 feet back. Center line of Fawcett Creek is the property line, calls 2 through 6, and he's even referenced the adjoiner on the other side of the creek, showing the land lot line. That's pretty much it. This is how we've taken our predetermined analysis in a very simple, it doesn't get any more simple than retracing a lot in a platted subdivision, folks. That's just as easy as it gets. If this had been a sequential conveyance out in the country, you got 3 or 4 different pieces of property that join. You probably may have 3 or 4 different surveyors with 3 or 4 different meridians, and you've got plats that don't have the same rotation. That's where these polylines come into play. You build the plat in, make sure it closes. If it doesn't close, then you know that your data from that is suspect. And of course, if it doesn't close the first time, try it again. If it doesn't close the first time, try it again to make sure that you're not fat fingered a call. If it still doesn't close, if the error is due north or due south within minute differences, if it's usually a blown quadrant. Either you put in the wrong quadrant or the plat or the deed's got the wrong quadrant in it. Try to resolve that so that your adjacent owner data has some positional integrity that you can rely on to establish your building corners. But then again, you can take these polylines, they all don't rotate exactly, but then you can pull them all in and rotate them, set them on top of each other so that they do. That's very easy to do in the office. That's part of your predetermined analysis. You can figure out, well, it's calling for a 1-inch open pipe and a 1/2-inch rebar in the back. You find the plat next door calls for the same thing. Hopefully, even though the bearing's 6 degrees difference, you can rotate one plat to sit on top of the other. Because at the end of the day, all we're doing is making a polyline or a shape, a form on the ground that's connected by monuments of varying weights and things. And so back to this one, this is a platted lot. So you're in simultaneous conveyance. Everything's going to hold original monuments. You don't have to worry about junior senior rights. You just rotate to the meridian that you're working on. You could just as easily have started with a magnetic north or set on 2 pins and enter that as your starting north. But by now, you should know how to generate and process data that was in previous courses. Uh, in other words, in order to get to um, excuse me, sorry for that. In order to get here where you've got coordinates and points to work from, that was before this class. If that's a skill set you don't have, I strongly recommend that you work on them. Uh, Experience is a great teacher, but make sure that you know how to do it right from academics. Probably survey two. I'm guessing. I'm not as familiar with the current scheme of courses as I was the ones from when I was there, which are different now. But once you've gotten the your field data reduced to coordinates and got those points plotted, then you're ready to go. You're ready to start analyzing, and that's what we did here. This lecture is on how to take field data and your predetermined analysis and equate boundary doctrine that's been taught into creating positions that you can draw a plat to. I hope you learn from this. I appreciate the opportunity to teach you these things. And if you do have any questions, if you are stumped, please contact me at your earliest convenience. I will be releasing shortly an ASCII file and a DWG file and some research data for your predetermined analysis on how to kick off your assignment for Module 7, which is preparing a plat. So uh, happy work, and we will talk to you soon.